I am joined by a brother in Christ, a minister, lots of hats, but someone I definitely consider a friend, Mr. Professor, cool guy, Dewayne Bryant. How you doing, man?
Doing all right, man. How are you?
Good, good. I haven't seen you in a while. We used to be out here in the same area for a time, and now you're on to very cool pastures. You're at Faulkner University. How's life been over there?
Hey, it's going pretty well. It's just a real blessing to get to be here and participate in, the educational process and getting people to, get in love with the Bible and know more about it, be able to interpret it better.
What's now, very important question. Do you pray before or after the chips and salsa? What's your custom?
Man.
I'm really curious about this.
It's after.
After?
Yeah.
Woo-hoo-hoo. Ooh, walking on the wild side, are we, huh?
I know, man. Eating all that unblessed food.
Yeah.
Playing with fire right there.
Well, I will tell you, I'm a after the chips and salsa guy. I was just saying this, I'm mostly like based off of whoever I'm eating with. I know some people that they're real adamant that you got to pray before before you even look at the chips sparkling in the basket. You know what I mean? You got to pray before anything shows up to your table. And if they want to do that, I'll do that. But I don't mind snacking on some chips and salsa. I think it's one of those things. It's like forgiveness in the Old Testament. I think it's already blessed in prospect of the prayer that I'm going to do later on, That's the way I kind of see it.
I'll have to remember that. That's awesome.
Oh, by the way, Dewayne Bryant has an awesome YouTube channel. It's just Dewayne Bryant on YouTube. He does a lot of stuff, but please check out his YouTube channel. I very much enjoy it. Christians always are looking for more stuff out there, and Dewayne Bryant is a great, great resource. Now, with that in mind, I uploaded a video where I watched a debate between Stephen Colbert, Ricky Gervais on the existence of God, and I got absolutely torched in the comments. They just torched me. I do want to express and show people that I really have goodwill and good faith, that I just want to learn, and if I'm wrong about something, I want to be, I want to align with the truth. That's why I want to do this with you. All I did was tell Dewayne Bryant, bring some of your favorite Christian evidences that Christians should know, things that are awesome, things that are interesting, whatever you want to do. I'm leaving it up to you, and I will ask you some questions about it, and maybe it's stuff I've heard before, maybe it's not. You're getting the most ignorant form of me possible, so hopefully that makes it fun.
Hey, that's all right, man. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, good. All right, what do you got? What's number one?
Now, the first thing I want to point out here is that the Bible is not mythology. That is something that we hear literally all the time. And it does matter how you define myth. For some people, it's just a fictional story, but myth and fiction are not the same thing. For some people, it's just a religious story or a story about the supernatural, and that kind of fits, but that's a really, really broad definition. What people seem to most frequently mean when they say the Bible is mythology or Bible is myth is, well, it's just like the Greek and Roman myths or Egyptian and Babylonian myths and things like that. And that is fairly easy to disprove. In fact, there was a book written on this called The Bible Among the Myths. The fellow who wrote it his name is John Oswalt. He's a scholar, biblical scholar, who deals with the prophet Isaiah. That's kind of his area of specialty. But he wrote this book, and it is absolutely illuminating when it comes to contrasting the Bible and mythology, because there are significant differences. So one thing that he points out is one is the moral character of the divine. And when you look at Scripture, you're going to see that God sets the standard for morals and ethics. Those are rooted in his character. And the Bible is very clear about his righteousness, his holiness, his perfection. You don't have to go very far to, especially Greek myths, where you find the gods are basically criminals. I mean, one of the things that's very easy to see is basically the male gods in Greek myths. They're practically all serial rapists. It is almost impossible, possibly impossible, to find not a single example of a Greek god that didn't rape somebody. And
Really?
yeah, it is an absolute moral atrocity.
Whoa.
that these things commit to women, goddesses, nymphs, you name it, and multiple examples each one. So things like that are immediately just a stark contrast.
Hmm.
Even in Babylonian myths, you've got, in the Babylonian creation story, you've got the parents of the gods, and the father wants to kill all the gods because they're keeping him awake at night, right? And then when humans come along, the gods want to kill all the humans because the humans are keeping them awake. So yeah, it's crazy when you look at some of this stuff.
So is like
Um,
one of the counter arguments to this is would do some of the people like the skeptics of the Bible and stuff and who align it right up there with mythology, do they try to cite stuff like deaths in the Old Testament or God striking people down and saying God's just like them? Is that something that they bring up?
yeah, sometimes they will. Uh, the difference is pretty stark still. I mean, even
Yeah.
if you allow for some of those, I do consider some of those mischaracterizations because in other myths it seems to be random acts of injustice, whereas in the Bible, if you do have a death or you do have something like the flood or the conquest, it at least gives some kind of moral basis
Hmm.
for why these things take place. So ultimately, there is some appeal to morality, whereas in mythology, there doesn't seem to be much of an appeal to morality at all. It's immoral.
That's interesting. I was hearing someone recently. There's this video on YouTube that I've been working on doing a podcast on called "Can Christians and Ex-Christians See Eye to Eye?" I think I don't remember the name of the YouTube channel that does it, but basically, there's like these four people who say they're Christians and four people who say they're ex-Christians, and one of them said, "Well, the reason why I'm not a Christian anymore is because when I was reading the Bible, especially the Old Testament, I saw that God is just like me. That He gets vengeful, He gets jealous, He gets angry, and I thought, well, then they kind of made this argument where like it's like all these Greek gods where I see myself in them, right, and they're basically like." Overpowered humans in a certain sense,
Hmm.
right? But I think that's a great point to make, and that's what that person was missing. That like, you say that God is just like you, but again, my reasons for vengeance are not the same as God's reasons for vengeance, and I think sometimes it's a cursory reading of the Bible that causes people to make these claims without contextualizing them at all, right? Is that kind of what you would say too?
It is, and again, with no disrespect to
Hmm.
those who
Hmm.
are not Christians, very often there is a very superficial understanding of the Bible that leads them into making mistakes and interpreting it. And so, as far as that goes, for a lot of objections, especially atheist apologists, you could go on TikTok or YouTube and literally just sort of pick apart a lot of these arguments because they don't have an in-depth understanding of Christianity, or they don't understand the biblical text, or they're relying on a translation that may not be very good, or they're misunderstanding a translation.
Yeah.
So that very frequently factors in. Okay, so moral character of the divine is one issue.
Hmm.
The view of mankind is another one. So the way that humanity is viewed in Babylonian myths is basically he is a slave of the gods. He is created to do the God's dirty work, and that is his maximum value.
Hmm.
If you go to Egypt, there's very little material on the creation of humanity. There's some pictures of this one particular God that creates humanity on a potter's wheel. There are a few texts here and there. Um, but the Bible is literally the longest and best preserved account of the creation of humanity in the entire ancient Near East. And when you look at it, humanity is literally the apex of God's creation. Humanity is the final, especially women. Woman is the final brushstroke. Creation is not complete without women,
Hmm.
and that often gets underappreciated because I've gone through in my Bible classes uh, at university where I've pointed out scripture after passage where it talks about the value of women, the importance of women, biblical heroines, as opposed to biblical heroes, moments where you have people like Abigail, where Abigail is very underappreciated as one of David's wives, but she essentially keeps him from going out because of her wisdom at a time when women were thought to be stupid. Because of Abigail's wisdom, she prevents David from going out and massacring a boatload of innocent people and things like that, where women are praised.
Hmm.
You don't really get that very much in the ancient world.
Yeah, I guess it sure
Um,
was nice of David to stop oppressing her for 5 seconds so she could speak up and give a piece of her mind, right?
right, that's right.
That's the way people
That's
look at
right.
it. It's like, what do you attribute that caricature to? That there's this oppression of women and stuff that's all throughout the Bible. What's your like going theory for where that caricature comes from?
I think it's easy to do that because the Bible is as much descriptive as it is prescriptive.
Hmm.
And so, you'll have people who will point to the Bible and say, the biblical writer lied there. Well, no, the biblical writer reported a lie that was told, and it's very clear that it was an act of deception.
Hmm.
And there are times when they actually condemn that, right? So it's again kind of goes back to just kind of a cursory reading of the Bible, and maybe a little bit of trying to read modern day um, kind of a feminist stance against the Bible.
Hmm.
That I think is kind of popular because traditionally, it's like, the Bible tries to diminish women and control women and that kind of thing, and that's a pretty popular kind of villain
Hmm.
to fight against. It gives you something to fight against.
Yeah. So you were saying that a lot of people in like Greek mythology, they're called to do like the gods' dirty work, like immoral things for the sake of the gods.
Not so much immoral things. It was, take care of the temples,
Okay.
feed the
Okay.
gods, take care of it. Sometimes I describe like how people treated an idol in the ancient world, and it blows people's minds.
Hmm.
They would sing to it and put a crown on it and perfume it and give it clothes and give it food. And when it got done eating, they would wash its hands. I mean, treat it like a child. And people just it's just mind-boggling
Uh huh.
that kind of thing happened. But that's humanity is the custodial caretaker
Yeah.
of just do everything for them, right?
Huh.
So that's kind of the view.
Yeah, and you even see that reflected in the Bible too, right? You see the idols. I don't remember what passage it is, but they're being mocked time and time again. Or like 1 Kings 18, right? Maybe your God's asleep. Maybe he's on in a faraway country, right? You see them get mocked sometimes, rightfully so. There aren't a lot of times where godly mocking occurs on like the part of humans, but there are some good situations for it, and I'm glad. I'm glad about that because sometimes you got to expose it, I guess, in that sense, right?
Yeah, yeah. One example that I thought of was in First Samuel, where the ark is captured, put into the temple of Dagon, and he falls over. The statue falls over, and the priests have to pick him back up, right? Because
Yeah.
he can't. He's fallen and he can't get up, right? Um, so so you got stuff like that happens from time to time.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so what's the next one here for the Bible is not mythology?
Okay, so one thing that is incredibly important, and I guess we'll finish with this. There are lots of points we could talk about.
Hmm.
This is one of the big ones, and that is the view of history. Now, history can be defined different ways. We can look at it as, well, history is what happened in the past. History is a written record of the past, right? Those kinds of small differences in definition for different aspects of it. But when you go back to history and historians, that is very different than mythology. It's also very different from the Bible. So, if you go back to mythology, it's sort of like the way I illustrate it, it's kind of like the opening credits in Star Wars, the very first, the original Star Wars, episode four, um, long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away. Okay, that's kind of how mythology works. It's
Hmm.
long, long ago in some indeterminate period in the past that these events happened,
Hmm. Hmm.
and no real connection to the present. And you look at some of these, and maybe they're told described as occurring in a certain place or that place, but there's no real historical grounding, geographical grounding for a lot of these stories. Whereas in the Bible, The biblical authors are exceptionally careful to make sure that you know when and where and what time these events actually happened.
Hmm.
So the Bible, uh, and this is kind of an important distinction. I would say the Bible is not written as history per se, but it is going that direction. It's sort of like proto history. And then the Greeks come along and actually write history for the sake of history, right? The Bible is filled with historical details, but it has sort of a spiritual connection, spiritual message behind it as well, theological message.
Hmm.
So it's not pure history, but it is absolutely going that direction, and more so than anything else that we find in the ancient world, because King's histories were very much like propaganda. Mythology was not like history at all. And
Hmm.
so that's an incredibly important distinction to make. Also, in the Bible, history is linear, going from point A to point B. In mythology, it's cyclical, round and round and round, right? The Nile rises and falls. The seasons, in Greek myths, the seasons go in cycles, right? So that kind of thing. History for the pagans was cyclical. History for the Hebrews was linear, and that's incredibly important to
Huh.
get that down.
Well, let me ask you about this. That comparison is very interesting. I never really thought about this. That if the Bible were written by men and they wanted it to be difficult to falsify, then it probably stands to reason that they would have made the historical timeline a lot more vague, right? It would benefit them to make the timeline of when things played out really vague, and maybe leave out names and stuff like that in places so that it would be harder to show to be false later on. But the Bible doesn't do itself any favors when it comes to that at all. The Bible is very specific: names, timelines, places, and stuff like that. Do you see what I'm saying there?
Oh, and that is absolutely correct. I
Uh-huh.
think a lot of the Bible's critics don't realize that the Bible is written that way. It's actually written in a way that kind of makes their job a little easier.
Hmm.
So they really actually make a mistake in equating the Bible to mythology.
Yeah, I never really thought about it that way. That again, the Bible is real specific about this. And again, if the intention was like, let's pull the wool over everyone's eyes and let's fool everybody, and let's let them not know that our book is a bunch of nonsense, then the thing that would make the most sense to do is to make it all really vague and hard to falsify or hard to prove wrong. But the Bible does basically the opposite of that. It gives all of this information, and I've said this before too, that I'm not afraid of scrutiny against the Bible. I believe that the Bible is true, and whenever I've seen scrutiny against the Bible, like you mentioned earlier, contradictions and things like that. I see in context and based off of what I've studied and read that no, those aren't contradictions at all. It's just a cursory reading by the people that are criticizing it. That the Bible is not afraid, and I'm personifying the book, but the Bible is not afraid of being criticized. The Bible is not afraid of exactly that, and it doesn't do itself any favors if it were trying to hide the fact that it's false and written by men. That's interesting.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
You just blew my mind, man. You just blew
Hey,
my
I'm glad
mind.
I could help.
Yeah. So, what is, at least for you, in the way you practice this, is there value to those stories for you, or do you just say, no, I don't really connect mythology with the Bible, or I don't want to give the wrong impression? You understand what I'm saying? Like, what can that relationship be, or what is that relationship for you?
Yeah, so of course, I really, really enjoy mythology. I just really get into it. And
Hmm.
so, Egyptian, Greek, Greco-Roman are some of my favorites. Of course, being an Old Testament guy, getting into mythology of Canaan, Ugaritic mythology, and Babylonian is kind of a mainstay. Um, I think there is some value in it from an apologetic standpoint, but I also just personally am fascinated by those ideas and what the ancients had to say because in some ways they thought in ways that were very similar to the biblical authors. So if you look at ancient wisdom writings, you'll find proverbs and things like that in ancient Mesopotamia um, or in Egypt that are very similar to what you'll find in the the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Same thing with things like Ecclesiastes or the book of Job, where they have similar compositions there. The difference, of course, though, is, in Job and Ecclesiastes, you're talking about writers who are pointing to the God of Israel, to the God of the Bible,
mm-hmm,
as opposed to, pagan gods of a polytheistic nature, which is sort of inherently contradictory,
mm-hmm.
or has inherent problems. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I know, like, I don't know how much you've heard him, but like people like Jordan Peterson seem to put it all on the same plane. But again, his emphasis is not like the Bible is the inerrant word of God. It's more just like these are stories with value to them on it, and they
Mhm.
explain humanity and things like that. And I think that's different. But yeah, I was curious about that. How far, how much you use it, I guess. But all right, without taking any more of your time, the next evidence that people should know about. The next part of that conversation is about to be uploaded, I think, by tomorrow. So if you're watching this, by tomorrow, you'll see the other part of it. I'm going to upload these in pieces just so that they're easier to digest. But if you want to see these full versions, again, they are on Patreon. You can see there for just as little as $5 a month, you can get all the extended versions, a weekly Q&A, and priority for video submissions for future podcasts. May God bless you. I'm glad you were part of the conversation. I hope it was a blessing to you. I just want to help you in between Sundays. Lord willing, I will see you soon. Take care.